whole piece about mental health was, for me personally, when I realized with my son, my own son, that I was becoming my father. He was a perfectionist. The guy was brilliant. And so everything had to be, if it's not done right, you got to do it over. And I was becoming like that with my son, but I wasn't like my son. My son's a great kid. And it hit me one day when I walked in the house and everybody left the room.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, it's like, wait, nobody was, they only talked to my wife. Nobody was talking to me, even my own son, who would go to baseball games and football, and I'd love to be with him. And okay, something's wrong here.
Right. And you noticed this yourself?
I noticed it.
Okay.
I noticed it. And then I said, babe, what? And I'm asking my wife, she says, you need to check yourself. It's always boom, 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 boom. And I realized then that I had become my
Welcome to another episode of Strong Place. I'm Ayo Johnson, Executive Director of Mental Health America of Central Carolinas. And do me a favor, if you could, please. We are always about extending our mission, which is to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health and getting people to talk more freely about our mental health. And so if you could please share this episode and also subscribe to our channel and hit the like button, as well as turn your notifications on so you know when all of our episodes are going to drop. And this morning, I had the great pleasure of interviewing Pastor Jordan Boyd. Reverend Jordan Boyd was born in Memphis, Tennessee, and is a graduate of Fraser High School. He is married to Dr. Sandra Simmons Boyd, and together they have 3 children, Lori, Zach, and Andre. Reverend Boyd came to Rockwell AME Zion Church in January 2013 after pastoring the Sills Creek AME Zion Church in Mooresville, North Carolina for 10 years, while serving as campus pastor and associate vice president of student affairs at Livingston College in Salisbury, North Carolina. He also served as associate minister of Little Rock AME Zion Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he was ordained in 1995. And Pastor Boyd, welcome to Strong Place.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So we had a great conversation a few weeks ago, and I'm so excited. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because we're going to talk about mental health in the church. Okay. And I know it's a passion of yours, and it's a passion of mine, and we'll definitely talk about it some more. So tell me what's not in the bio that you want people to know about you. What did I miss?
Yeah, well, you gave me the lead-in question for today, which was mental health in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it prompted me to start to reflect upon what that was like for me growing up in Memphis at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in the 60s. I remember when Dr. King was killed. If you remember, he was killed in Memphis. I was 7 at the time. I can remember exactly where I was standing.
I was not born yet.
I
but I heard about it.
I was standing in the middle of the street where we always played.
Right.
When the tanks rolled down the street, the National Guard, the mayor, issued curfew and shut the place down. I remember my neighborhood burning down. Stores that we normally shop every day were set on fire. I remember my mother crying. It was, I liken it to Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know the story, it's a paradox of life where joy and sorrow coexist. And so it was the best of times, and at times it could be the worst of times. But I remember growing up in an environment where the community was your family. And so we were loved by everybody, watched over by everybody, while at the same time there were hustlers and pimps and brothels and all other kind of things going on. My father in my life was a larger-than-life figure. I'm a preacher's kid. He was a pastor and associate who at one time fell out with the church, became disenfranchised with the church because he didn't think the church was true to its mission to care for the poor, the needy. I remember as a young kid, snow on the ground. I could barely ride in the truck. He was a contractor. He owned his own business. And we stopped by a lady's house one time who didn't have food or wood to light her stove. And the church was right across the street, and the pastor didn't know it. And he was, I would classify him as a guy who had anger management issues. He would snap on, and so it didn't matter who you were or where he was. If it was something he was passionate about, he was going to let you know it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was difficult, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun. My therapist describes my experience and where I am now is post
Mm-hmm.
traumatic stress.
Mm-hmm. What's the two posts for?
That I'm post that experience of my childhood and growing up,
Mm-hmm.
and post that is where I am now, living through that experience in my adulthood. So all of our lives, as I come to understand, are influenced so heavily by the experiences and encounters we have as a child.
Right.
I had almost forgotten until you gave me the question that at 13, my best friend died in a drowning accident.
Oh, wow.
That was probably my first experience with grief and trauma,
Mm-hmm.
with no one to walk me through how to process that. I went to work the next day with my dad. I remember where I was standing with him when he told me, and I'm grateful for having to always be with him because it was Saturday. I had to go to work,
Mm-hmm.
and but it protected me and kept me out of a lot of mischief and things that I probably would have gotten into, but I would have been with him that day with a group of other boys who went to swim in a sand pit that was being built in the neighborhood. And he drowned, and I remember him telling me at the end of the day, we were at my aunt's house, that he had died from a drowning accident. Our neighborhood was very interesting. We walked to our school, but adjacent to the school was a landfill, if you can imagine that.
Right.
Adjacent to an elementary
school is a landfill.
Was a landfill. Hear me now.
Right.
We called it the dump.
Right. That's pretty much what it was.
A lot of some of my classmates would be teased because it was said that they lived on the dump. They got their clothes from the dump. We grew up poor, but you didn't know you were poor.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize I was poor until my first year of college, when I had to undergo a financial aid audit. And I called my dad and said, "Hey, they want your tax returns." He said, "You tell them I don't have to file one." Why is that? Well, if you make under $10,000 in income, you didn't have to file tax returns. And this was 79. And I went back and looked it up, and he was right. But part of that was due to policies, written, redlining. We lived in an all-black neighborhood, so banks drew a line around us. I remember my dad protesting First Tennessee Bank, walking with a sign.
Wow.
Because it wouldn't, even though we owned our house and it wasn't much, probably didn't value much, but we owned it. He owned his own truck, tractor, dump truck. Now it wasn't brand new, but it was his, and it was free and clear of any liens, but he couldn't get a loan or capital to fund some of the business ventures.
Mm-hmm.
He died when I was 19.
So a year after you get to college, you lose your dad?
After I get to college. In fact, the next day we were going to go back. He was going to take me back to school. I was fortunate enough to go to school on an athletic scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
He was very proud of that. He was twice enlisted in World War II.
Okay.
My aunt and grandmother, his grandmother, always said that the second time he came out, he was different.
Mm-hmm.
Changed him. And we lived with that change because he was very volatile. Although he was brilliant, in our house, which is small, there was an architectural room that he off on the side where he would architecturally design, draw houses, and then build a house. He could do it all. Electrical, plumbing, roofing. That's why I grew up. Every summer after school, I had to go to work. I realized later on in life I had this rebellion in me because whenever all the other kids were all playing, I had to go to work. It wasn't until later in life, in my adulthood life, that I come to regret that I couldn't say thank you, because it gave me an extreme work ethic. But at the same time, there was no balance.
Right.
6 days of work, 6 days a week for me.
Do you think that those childhood experiences and losing your dad early in your teen years kind of began to mold or was the foundation for any mental health challenges you may have later in life?
I do in a different kind of way.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that with him it was always an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that we could start out in the morning, everything would be great, and by midday, the roof was falling in, sky was falling in. He was arguing with somebody on the job. He was encountering. We'd have to go to the landfill I mean, he's in a almost fisticuff with the guy at the gate.
Wow.
What would be determined as road rage today, somebody at the red light. I mean, it was constant. You'd never know. It was a flip, snap.
Right.
I can remember incidents where police would come to the house. Sometimes it was volatile with he and my mom, and she was an angel. They just had these differences, and police walking through the house, man. Why the police walking through the house, man? It's like she called the police on him a couple of times. But this guy was the greatest guy in the world. But mentally, he was snapped.
Yeah.
We go on a job. I remember going on a job one day, and we were going to replace a roof on a house, on a store.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also going to rent the store. He was a serial entrepreneur. He was a contractor, but we owned a convenience store, laundromat. He was always trying something to try and
It
make.
seems like he was well beyond his years in terms of how he
Oh,
thought.
God, you sound like my sister. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was way ahead of his time.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you I hear a couple of different things when you talk about your dad. Brilliant, multi-talented, but also seemed like he was struggling with something internally, maybe from the war, or just maybe from growing up in poor, right, in the South,
Yeah.
and so many things that could have contributed to that.
All of that,
Right.
he never, ever complained.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always say, I'm not worried about anything. I'm not worried about anything. But I, in retrospect and looking back, I knew he had to be.
Right.
Having owned my own business, 4 or 5 of my own businesses, realized making payroll,
Mm-hmm.
not getting
It's
paid.
stressful.
I know he had to, but he never said he worried. But now I know that he was worried. And I
Right.
know he were worried because he had high blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of those guys who didn't trust the VA, like many African-American men.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't go to the doctor. He would keep this big bottle of aspirin on the dashboard of the truck. So he had a headache all the time, and his way of self-medicating was to take aspirin.
And that's what everybody did back in the day.
Back in the day.
Now there's no shortage of things to take, but back in the
So
day,
much so,
everything was.
it ate his intestines up. And so one night I'm at the store with him, and he's bleeding out.
Oh wow.
He's bleeding out, and we finally call the ambulance, and you got high blood pressure. You need to really treat this and go to. He wouldn't do it, and worked all the time, nonstop. I don't know when he ever slept, because if he wasn't working, he was reading something all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Smoked these cigars all the time, and he didn't smoke cigars like we do today, where you don't inhale. He inhaled.
Right.
Old King Edward cigars. He wasn't a guy, and there was no, balance of life where you Christmas and celebrate. We didn't do none of that.
Yeah.
And this guy that I spent so much time with, who I love so dearly, it was strange. And thinking back when he died, I don't remember. The feelings I had were mixed. I was glad and I was sad.
How did that affect, because 19, I guess you would have been a sophomore in college or going, you said you were about to go back to college.
Yep.
How did that affect your studies? And then I'm also interested in understanding how you ended up in ministry.
Yeah. So his whole life was ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Even with my mom, our whole life was ministry. It was nothing to wake up at our house and a stranger would be at the table eating breakfast with us.
Wow.
Some cat off the street. He was always picking up guys from the unemployment office, taking them to work.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time we had a Muslim brother living with us. Now I'm in the house with my mom, two sisters, me, my dad. We had one bathroom, and this guy's living on a little cot up in the front of the house.
Wow.
And that didn't last a little, but he liked the guy.
Mm-hmm.
It picked him up from the unemployment office. He liked the way it worked. He was trying to give him a chance, and that blew up because my mom put some pork in the pinto beans, and the guy ate it. You know, Muslims have the strict dietary
Time for
code,
him to move out.
He had to go,
Right.
but it was always a confrontation. It was violent. It was like, guns pulled. It was like, dang, man. I was like, what the what?
Right.
And this was not an uncommon occurrence. This was a common occurrence. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to see it more than my sisters because I spent so much time with them.
Right.
And so somebody was always living with us. My grandmother on my mom's side died in my bed
Oh.
in my home. I was really, really young then. I just remember her dying and faintly that, but it was always someone living there. So we grew up with a caring spirit.
Right.
I mean, we'd be coming home from work.
You were almost living out what it means to be the church, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So it sounds like your family was, which I think, and I don't want to get into like the politics, but I think that that's something, a definition or parts of the Bible that a lot of people that call themselves Christian don't think about today, right? When there's things so polarized about, do we help this? Do we help that? You know, cutting programs. No, when you live out, you know, being like a walking epistle, when you live that out, that means basically what your family was doing, you know, taking care of people that didn't have someplace to live, feeding people that didn't have anything to eat. So it sounds like you learned this really young and your parents modeled this for you. And so you go into ministry. And at what point did you always know that you wanted to be in ministry full time? Or because you also said that you've had several businesses yourself, or was this a struggle between you and God to get you into full time ministry?
Yeah. No one wakes up and says, I'm going into ministry.
Well,
No, it's no. You run. You don't run to ministry.
Right.
You don't run to the calling. You run away from the calling till you can't run anymore. And
is that what happened with you?
That's what happened with me, and it was probably most devastating for my wife because she always says, I didn't marry a pastor. I didn't marry somebody in the ministry. She called her mom. She'd be crying every day. He's going to go into the ministry. I know he's going to. I can't do it.
I hear that commonly from first ladies.
I can't do it. I can't do it. And I did. And because you can't run anymore. And just this whole modeling of helping.
Mm-hmm.
You grow up with it. You see it. We be riding home from work all week long. Just got paid.
Mm-hmm.
And he passed somebody that just got evicted, a single mom, their stuff sitting out on the street. He stopped. We'd have to load that stuff on a truck and take it to storage and get her at a place to stay.
Wow. That's all. Your dad was an amazing person with such a huge heart.
Unbelievable. Always defending the poor, standing up, advocating to the detriment of his own family. He could not. He'd give away what he had worked so hard for all week. If it weren't for my aunt and my grandmother, we wouldn't have made it.
You hear that commonly from PKs.
Yeah.
You know, and so interesting, with your dad having that kind of heart, and I could see why you ran from ministry because, when you and I talked, I told you that I used to work in full-time ministry and was a church administrator of a large growing church in New Jersey, and I came across so many PKs that was like, when I get old enough, I want nothing to do with this. I don't want anything to do with the church because of the impact, because of the sacrifices they had to make as kids. They didn't understand when other kids were, my kids talk about it. My kids talk about it, they have similar, I think, church scars because I was working in full-time ministry. I ended up being licensed as a minister, and they talk about when all their friends were out trick-or-treating or they were at the hallelujah party. So, yeah, I can understand that. So I really wanna talk about you get into ministry. Um, do you is there a discussion with you between you and God about how you wanna do ministry, doing it your way? Um you're part of the AME Zion denomination. I know a little bit about it. I've never been a member of an AME Zion church, but we did worship with them. So I'm just curious as to you get into ministry, right? As you call it, you have this post PTSD, right, or post trauma disorder, and you talk about also having a therapist. And that's not something that I hear a lot of pastors talk about openly. Just tell me a little bit about what your approach was to ministry, how you decided what lane you were going to be in ministry, and then what came to a point when you decided I'm going to talk openly about therapy and mental health from the pulpit because we. I'm not gonna say you're a unicorn because I have heard a couple of other pastors talk about it, but you know I didn't grow up in church, so I made an intentional decision as a young adult to enter into church. But I've been in so many settings. I've been in rooms with a lot of these pastors you see on TV when they weren't mega pastors, and nobody was really talking about mental health, and you still don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So, how'd you choose your lane of ministry, and what prompted you to start talking about it and leaning in specifically?
So I guess the best way to say that is I didn't choose it; it chose me.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is the model that I described for you. I've always had an affinity for the church,
Mhm.
but not in the building,
Mhm.
in what it represented, because of what I had seen and what I knew about what the church should be doing in terms of helping people.
Mhm.
That when Jesus encountered people, he sought to help them.
Yeah.
And I saw that model throughout my family
Mhm.
and my community. We were part of a church, and like I said, my father became disenfranchised with the church, and for a long time, uh, we go to he make us go to church on Sunday mornings while he stayed home, and eventually he came back at the end and was an associate. But the whole piece about mental health was, for me personally, when I realized with my son, my own son, that I was becoming my father.
Mm.
Uh, he was a perfectionist. The guy was brilliant, and so everything had to be, if it's not done right, you got to do it over.
Mhm.
And I was becoming like that with my son, but I wasn't like my son. My son's a great kid,
Mhm.
and it hit me one day when I walked in the house and everybody left the room.
Oh.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's
So
like,
what was
wait,
that?
nobody wants. They only talked to my wife. Nobody was talking to me. Even my own son, who would go to baseball games and football, and I love to be with him. And okay, there's something's wrong here.
Right. And you noticed this yourself.
I noticed it.
Okay.
I noticed it, and then I said, "Babe, what?" And I'm asking my wife. She says, "You need to check yourself. It's
Mm.
always boom, 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 boom." And I realized then that I had become my father, And that's when I went to a therapist who helped me to unpack a whole lot of stuff and reframe how I could father
Mm-hmm.
and husband and do it differently and get it out of my head. And because you grow up with this and unconsciously you start to become it without even knowing it. And
Right.
although you don't want to be it, you are it.
Right.
The gift is the revelation.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the change can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the willingness to change. Because when you say you love, but at the same time you're causing pain, that's a conundrum. I can't love you and cause you pain.
Right.
My love for you has to be joy and peace and all that Christ talks about.
Mm-hmm.
When I was pastoring my first church, I was also working as a campus minister at Livingstone College.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the young people there were first generation college students. And many of them, most if not all of them, came with very little to nothing. First time ever on a college campus. So it was always in student affairs is about helping the students.
Right.
So you had to do all you could to try and, one, keep them in college, but also keep them grounded in a way and pointed in the right direction that they could see something for themselves that they couldn't see having been a first generation college student.
Right.
Which took me back home. I found myself doing the same thing on the college campus that I was doing in life, that my dad was doing in life growing up.
Right.
With young folk. And then now at the church where I am today, our involvement with, first of all, COVID. COVID happens in 19. We become involved with the community to address chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
This was very near and dear to me because my dad died in his sleep.
Oh, wow.
At 56.
Oh, he was young.
At 56 years old. I remember like yesterday, giving him the phone because somebody wanted work the next day. He didn't wake up. They said natural causes, but he didn't wake up. So with that, working through that, we started, myself and 5 other pastors began to work in partnership and collaboration with Mecklenburg County Public Health through a young lady who had an idea to convince the county to give money directly to churches to address chronic disease. That if you wanted to reach the most needy around this area, which is Black folk, in terms of hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and heart health,
yes,
we in the church.
Right.
Every time we get together and we meet, we eat fried
chicken, mac and
cheese, and sweet tea,
yams,
and the best desserts in the whole wide world.
What?
Listen, when I went to the church where I am now, in 6 months I gained 15 pounds.
They fed you.
They were loving on me real good, but it was not good. Okay,
right.
So 5 churches and 50 people become 70 churches and 700 through this competition.
Okay,
we win the Edna Healthy Cities Challenge. COVID hit, and it exposed the level of pain, trauma, and grief because of the death that was happening. We were fortunate in being on the calls with the state and DHHS during the time. ARPA dollars were flowing. They said, "What do you need?" We said, "We need money to address mental health for our people." And we got a grant to do a 3-year pilot to bring mental health services to our community, to go out and reach folks in the highest disparate zip codes. There are 7 in Mecklenburg County, and we use those funds along with a model to reach people and support them in their efforts so they can get up to 5 and even 10 free mental health sessions. But the main thing was to connect them with services as they go through homelessness, as they go through being evicted, as they go through food insecurity, as they go through loss, grief, trauma. Yeah.
What's the name of this program?
It's called Bridge to Better Mental Health, B2B, Bridge to Better Mental Health.
And is this program still going on?
Still going on. Okay. We're in year three.
Okay.
In fact, that's why I've got to leave today. I'm meeting a potential funder So that
Listen, I'm not going to stand between you and that money. I know what it's like.
to see if we can continue the program. We've gotten some very positive response. We're showing impact. We have an evaluator at Chapel Hill. She's a therapist herself,
Mhm.
African American, who understands, who piloted me with helping to get this off the ground.
Right.
Yeah, but to your point about me, that's the commitment myself and 7 other pastors made, that we would partner to lift this up. From our own personal perspective, I
Mhm.
stand in front of my church and say, I saw my therapist this month, and I'm encouraging you to do the same, especially with what's going on in our society today,
Mhm.
in the electorate, the politic, how we can go about uh, finding the balance and not be so insecure about what's happening and the
Mhm.
impact that is happening, especially with seniors. I
Mhm.
have a lot of seniors in my church that are afraid. I have a lot of children that are afraid if you can get them to talk about it. So we bring a lot of programs to the church, openly talk about it, group workshops for young people and their parents to help parents understand there's a new way to parent the new 21st century child. And if you're
Mhm.
using 19th century model parenting skills, it's not going to work
Not gonna work. Gonna be in battle every day.
every day, and you're going to lose.
Right.
And you're going to lose the child too.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say that because as soon as they can, they're gonna head for the hills and leave.
COVID was really hard for our church and for me. Um, People were dying, sick and dying. I couldn't go into the hospitals to minister. Um, Many family members could not be traveled to come to the services.
Yep.
You had brothers and sisters and husbands and spouses, wives that could not go to their own family services.
Right.
In
Women
2018,
giving birth alone because they couldn't, their spouse couldn't, or no one could go
couldn't go in.
in the hospital with them. It was a lot.
Go in.
Yeah.
In 2018, my wife lost her sister. We were sitting at the table. Her husband calls and says she's died. She died of a massive heart attack at 49.
Oh.
Our nephew was 13 at the time. 2 years later in COVID, he dies. So at 15, he's orphaned.
Oh, wow.
So he's our 3rd child.
Okay.
And so that's the impact. Our
That's-
whole family was in therapy.
Hmm.
Of course, he needed to be, because at 13, he loses his mom, 15, loses his dad. And his whole world has changed. But when I tell you the power of therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't work the first time because I guess it was too soon, but we finally got him with the right one. And I mean, it's like flipping the light on.
Right.
He's on a
Absolutely.
full ride scholarship today, pre-med major. I need to borrow some money from him. He's got so much money coming in.
Is that your funder you're going to meet with?
No. I left him today. I said, I need you to do these dishes before I get home tonight.
Right. Well, Pastor Boyd, I do want to respect your time, and I want to thank you so much for coming. This was a really rich conversation, and I know there's so many different directions we could have taken it. And I also want to just thank you for being that voice out in the church community and making sure that we're talking about it from the pulpit, about leaning into our mental health, because God gave us mind, body, and spirit. And we need, it's our job to be good vessels and stewards of the vessel that he gave us. And our mind is one of them. And taking care of our mental health is extremely important. Please tell the audience where they can find out more information about your programs. And, if it's a website or any social media handles that they can find out more information.
Absolutely. Thank you. villageheartbeatinc.org or vhbinc.org. You can go to, we have a Facebook address as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically it. And you can go onto the site and find any resources that you need. And don't be afraid to call or reach out, and we'll be able to help you.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Strong Place. I'm Ayo Johnson, Executive Director of Mental Health America, Central Carolinas. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. Until next time.